Hey guys, what is up? Welcome to another installment of viewer submitted invasions. The first build we have today is from Dare Android. He sends us his spear build. This is actually really cool. His approach is similar to mine, but different enough that I thought it would be interesting to watch and talk about it. The first thing I know, it's soul level 100. I typically play at 90, but a lot of the action comes from hosts at 120, so 100 is probably a smart move. He gets a bit of stat spread that I'm not a huge fan of. I think he has to sacrifice a lot of endurance and a little bit of vigor in order to bump up his strength. Now, because he's running blessed weapons like the Lothric Knight Ultra Greatsword, I don't know how much the strength is contributing to the AR on that. I truly don't. If anyone does know, I'd be interested in hearing, but that's one area where I think maybe a small build improvement could be made, take some of those points out of strength, migrate them into endurance. The other interesting thing is that he rocks Bountiful Sunlight, which is like an upgraded version of Bountiful Light. So Bountiful Light gives you 7 HP per second. Bountiful Sunlight gives you 10 HP per second, but it takes two attunement slots to equip. You can see here he's casting at the beginning and just kind of getting chewed up a bit. It's weird. Sometimes people can like sort of hit through the spears, especially with big Ultra Great Swords. Obviously with smaller weapons, they really can't do that as easily. He's using an Ultra Greatsword too, which I think is an interesting choice, and it's something that I've personally kind of stayed away from. I think the advantage is when you get a big group that comes in and they're being really aggressive, it's a much safer way to shut them down than like with my Greatsword, say. But the problem that you'll see is the problem with all Ultras, it becomes very difficult to finish people off. So I know he's got an offhand rapier, but I don't think I've ever seen you use that, Dare Android. And if it were me, I would actually think about going with the S stock. Now, obviously, you give up the parries, but you've got a parry shield anyway that you can equip for those things. So give the offhand S stock a try. You know, when you're trying to finish off that host and he's rolling away like crazy, there's really nothing that beats it. So you could use the Ultra like you did there, get big damage in, and then when they're just going to start reaction rolling everything you throw out, then it's the time to switch over to the S stock. The Bountiful Sunlight has an added benefit that it's much more likely to pick up the Guardian. So in these like 3v1, 4v1 fights that tend to go on for a long while, it might be really helpful to use and pick up the Guardian, because the Guardians can stick around quite a bit longer. I think too, you've also got you're using the blessed weapon, so you're getting a lot of regen there. You're using the weapon art on Filionor's Chime, that's giving you a lot of regen. So this is just like a regen tank, which I think is a really cool build, and actually reminds me quite a bit of Old Rabid One's build. So if you don't know Old Rabid One, I'll leave a link to his channel as well, because he has a very similar spear approach to the one that you're using. I love that backstab through the space launch. Like, that was so awesome. And I see here, obviously, you switch to the rapier two-handed. Probably a good choice right there. And the disconnect. So predictable. Nice job. So I didn't actually do the calculation to figure out how much regen you're getting when all your buffs are up, but I've got to think it's probably in the neighborhood of like 18 HP per second, which is just a ridiculous amount of regen. And in fact, against the larger crews, the 3v1s and the 4v1s, your regen is easily going to outpace the rate at which they can damage you, unless they're very careful and coordinated and they're able to break your poise. That's about the only time they're going to be able to really out-damage that regen. Obviously, against a solo host, it's really a different story, especially when they've got something like Leto's Hammer. That makes them very, very dangerous, because all it takes is one mistake on your part. And see, like right there, I think you could afford to be a bit more aggressive, because you just kind of let that host back off and heal for free. And because you can't really heal, I mean, obviously you've got regen, it puts you at a real disadvantage. Like, the only real reason, in my view, to break off is for you to heal, but you really can't. So think about trying to apply a bit more pressure, but obviously it didn't matter. Nice mix-ups on the Ultra, and you're able to put the host away. Okay, so next up, that brings us to Alfeira. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I really like this build. It's a strength build. I think the stats are really well allocated. You've got 18 faith, which obviously lets you use the Fillion or Chime weapon art for regen, and it also allows you to use the blessed weapon buff, which I think is pretty helpful. You know, the blessed buff looks kind of underwhelming sometimes when you look at it, but because it adds physical damage, all the defenses have essentially already been accounted for, so it's like pure AR. So even though it may only look like, 20, 25 points, it's still a substantial bump, and especially when you consider that you pick up the Fillion or Chime weapon art for free in a sense, I think this is definitely a build change worth making. Now, I've seen players like Derpy go to like 13 faith, and then they'll use the ring that gives them 5 points of faith, and they'll swap to it when they want to use the regen, or if they want to use something like the blessed weapon buff. That's something to consider as well. For me, that's too much ring management. I wouldn't want to do that, but if you're into ring swapping like that a lot, that's a way that you can be more stat efficient. So the invasion starts off, and it is not a good look because, first of all, they're all using the Untrue Dark Ring, or at least two of the three of them are. You can tell that like these guys like to gank together. They've got builds that work well together. You've got the one guy that's spamming Perseverance with the Cestus. You've got the spellcaster that's spamming the spells. That's really annoying to deal with. And then somebody with a Murakumo doing big damage. Being in a place like this with all three of these players is just a nightmare to deal with. I'm almost impossible to win against, so you really have no choice. You have to try to split them up. It's no coincidence that they wanted to all stand together at the top of that sort of platform where they could all just shit on you. But obviously this player right here, not all that great, doesn't understand the principle of reaction rolling, doesn't realize he's getting roll caught over and over. Nice job. That particular spell, I think it's called like Dark Edge, is actually a really good spell to try to roll backstab if you unlock. Nice backstab attempt there. I think that was a really good read. He's just going to hit Perseverance as soon as you approach, and I think you made a great read. I love this here. This is one of my favorite scenes ever. You know to pop Perseverance after he does, so his is going to wear off before yours does, and you are always going to win the trade. So you just kept heading Perseverance until he attacked, so you always had priority. I thought that was brilliant. Very, very nicely done. Okay, so that brings us to Alfeira's second invasion. Here I see you're wearing the Untrue Dark Ring. One of the side effects of the Untrue Dark Ring that I've noticed is you blend in a lot more easily. It's almost like an obscuring ring in a sense because people are looking for the bright red player, and a lot of times you can get a lot closer and they won't notice. Or if it's a strange phantom, they might not realize at first that you're not the host. But personally, I prefer not to use the Untrue Dark Ring, and we'll talk about that more in a little bit. There's something really interesting that happens coming up here. I can't remember if it's right here. It's a little bit later. So I like the approach of bringing the elevator up, and then while you're waiting for that, running up here to see if the party's up there. You see that the PvE hasn't been disturbed, so back over to the elevator, and of course the elevator is on the way back down. I see you go into the corner here, and I couldn't figure out at first what you were doing. And then I realized you can actually see all the way to the bottom and see somebody getting on the elevator. I had no idea that you could do that. I will definitely be incorporating that into my invasions. Thanks for sharing that. Rolling onto the top of the platform here, smart idea. You see the red sign above the other player who's using the Untrue Dark Ring. Of course, he doesn't have a chance to see you. Fortunately, he realizes and he stops attacking, but that's one of the reasons I don't like using the Untrue Dark Ring. Now, admittedly, in a place like the Archives, it's much less of a problem. But when you get to a place like Pontiff or the Ring City, where the ganks are a lot more common and multiple invaders are much more common, then I prefer to stay away. But that's a style choice as much as anything else. So don't take that as a criticism that you should change it. I like the view up here. Obviously, you get an excellent view of the entire Archives area, what PvE is still around, what isn't. Hunting for hosts in these sort of situations can be difficult, especially if they gank, because the shortcuts will all already be open, but that will tell you nothing about where the party actually is. I think that was a smart idea to swap away. Now, this is interesting. You swap over to the cat ring, and that is definitely not something that I would have done. I would not think that I would need the cat ring in this situation. Now, obviously, I would be thinking that they might go into the middle there and head back into the archives proper, but I would probably hard swap in that situation. But as it turns out, I think it was a really smart move on your part, and it ends up paying off. But again, it's not something that I would have done, so it makes me realize I probably should start swapping the cat ring more often, because I'm not good enough to swap like in the middle of combat like some players are. I think you approach this situation really, really well. Hit the host that third time, unlock and back off because you don't have eyes on the white. Catch him with a rolling attack. Just textbook, really, really nice situational awareness. Nice weapon R2 there to ensure that you're able to poise through any attacks that he might dish out. And here the cat ring pays off. And the host falls, pops his tears, and you get him with a plunging attack. Very, very nicely done. Okay, so the final clip today comes courtesy of a player by the name of Noctuary. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Noctuary sent me an email along with the video clip talking about the challenges of passive play from hosts, and we're going to see that here in a minute. But Asheran actually made a really good point. In the email, Noctuary actually included this quote from Asheran. I dislike passive parties, and I think most people do too, but something that stuck with me one time was someone pointing out that they're often right not to engage you or chase you into a level. When they do, and you win, you're sort of proving that their passivity was the right option after all. And I think that's totally true. Obviously, I think hosts give up less by chasing you into a level than you as the invader give up by going into an open area where they're all present, but I can totally understand why they make that decision. So let's talk about the build. So this is a Mad King Crucifix build, which requires, in my view, a pretty specialized build, and I think Noctuary's created that kind of build where it's a strength and faith hybrid. The only problem with builds like this is that they're really only suited to using a handful of weapons really efficiently. Like, it can use Mad King Crucifix really efficiently. I don't know what other sorts of weapons it would use efficiently. Faith is there. You want to obviously use Dark Blade on this weapon for maximum damage. This is a fearsome, fearsome weapon. I know in the past, I always dread when I run into somebody using this weapon, and if they're really good, it usually does not turn out very well for me. But I think the build is pretty good. Vigor could obviously stand a little bit of help, but it's soul level 90. With a build like this, you're going to have to make some sacrifices. So that a lot of that just comes down to personal preference. So we're going to see here in a moment, Noctuary is going to be confronted with the problem of the passive party. Good situational awareness there, by the way, to roll after that first R1 and avoid the host coming up behind you. But essentially what's going to happen here is the party isn't going to want to move forward into the level. And of course, Noctuary's doing a lot of damage to them, which is not going to make them want to move any more than they would have already. I think the way that you deal with the problem here, Noctuary, is a reasonable way, using the lightning urns. I'm sure most people at this point know, but if you have a faith build or a dark build or whatever, anything where you've leveled up faith, lightning urns do shit tons of damage. I mean, I think they're almost broken given how much damage they do. Like fire bombs don't do anywhere near that amount of damage. I don't know if you parry at all, but I did notice that the host likes his rolling attacks. If you like to parry at all, that's a really easy parry to pick up, something to think about. But when it comes to motivating passive parties, I think this is a problem that bedevils any invader, and many of us have worked up different ways to try to motivate them. I'd be very curious to hear what people say in the comments about their preferred methods. Unlock crossbows with exploding bolts is a favorite. Noctuary, you yourself alluded to using a great bow. I don't know if right here is really a great place for the great bow, as you said. It's definitely an option, but one I probably wouldn't use either. Another option is the Storyteller Staff. Storyteller Staff has low requirements. I think you only need like 12 int, so you can swap to the ring that gives you 5 points of intelligence on a low int build. It does a special kind of poison damage that's much more damaging than normal poison. A lot of people don't realize that, so you can try to use that to motivate parties, especially at lower levels where they maybe don't have the moss to take care of the poison. Another option is popping Perseverance and rushing in. That's something that you can do. You can also try whips, because you can stand at range with whips or with a spear and poke people. But with two ultra great weapons, going in with both of them and they can flank you just is really a non-starter. So I think that you're really handling this the right way. You're being patient. You're not giving in to impatience and rushing in, which is almost certainly going to get you killed. Even though it's a faith build, once you run out of lightning urns, you could always think about swapping over to fire bombs, which obviously aren't as damaging, but could still be annoying. Now, one thing I'm noticing is you seem to have a habit of back rolling after every R1, and I would encourage you to think about maybe if you could stop doing that sometimes. Like, don't be in the habit of rolling after you swing at somebody like that. Try to reaction roll as much as you can. Against multiple people, we all fall prey to that sometimes, but that's just an opportunity. Another thing is, I notice when you press R1, you're immediately going to the L2, which is sometimes a really great option, but not always. And I think a lot of these cases, you would have been better served by just pressing R1 a second time. The L2 is really good for people that want to roll into you, so that you whiff the first R1, the L2 comes out fast enough that it can hit them before they have a chance to get their attack off. That would be when I would really suggest using that. Another option for passive parties in this situation would have been for you to keep using the weapon art until it gave you Perseverance, or until it gave you like that dark ball that you could just take into the group and then roll out. That's a very nice R2 there, and another really nice R2. You just barely missed the roll catch there. Good pressure. This host here really has no clue what to do here. Nice use of those R2s. Obviously, once the Phantom's out of the picture, it's pretty much, it's all over for the host. Nice job. Well, everybody, thanks so much for showing your clips, and check out everybody's channel in the description below. Thank you.